where it's like they're getting married and it's like, oh, I can't wait to take Judy home and find reveal to her that her husband is, or her groom supreme is none other than soft-spoken Ethan Crane. It's like, of course the 50s version wouldn't like have that be revealed that early. Like we would wait until they're already married to have the secret identity reveal.
But groom supreme,
Yeah.
come on.
Everyone, and welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jmike Falson.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show.
Welcome back. Many happy returns indeed, because today we are looking at a nostalgic work for me that is in itself an extremely nostalgic work about comics. And to have a conversation about this big universe that is contained within this 12-issue book that we're talking about today, we are joined from the McCaw podcast universe by Micah McCaw.
Hello, everybody. Excited to be here. You've been wanting me to be on this show, but I've been too scared because my knowledge of Superman is not as much as I wish it was. But then this showed up in the mail, and if that's not a way to get someone on the podcast, I don't know what is. So
Yeah. So I am continuing to evangelize the series that we were talking about today, because today we are talking about the first 12 issues of Alan Moore's run on Supreme, also known as the Supreme Story of the Year, or in this trade paperback, Supreme, the Story of the Year. But it is a 12-issue arc. It is not the complete run of the Alan Moore Supreme. And it actually occurred to me while I was reading this that many of the issues that I consider like the real standouts of his run are in the next volume, which is incomplete.
Crap.
I love this arc. And frankly, this is a 12-issue complete story.
Yeah.
So there is that, and that's a big part about why I think it's great to talk about. And I think while individual issues all are part of this larger meta narrative that is going on, and thus the bigger story is really strong. It just sucks. It's like, oh, but there are some really cool issues that are later, and that means that we'll have to revisit the series again at some point. But the actual 12 issues here, I just think are great for us to talk about on the show, because it is such a commentary on Superman from the perspective of characters existing in a world of comics being real, and then also it being, you know, a fictional universe. This is why, like, this is me. This is the bullshit that I go for all the time. And I will note that. So the two of you are coming into this cold. You did not read this before we were going into this. I will say this. So the comic in general was insanely cutting edge when it came out 30 years ago. Like, this came out in 1995, 1996 era, and it is remarkable that in 2005 it was still cutting edge, and in 2015 it would be like what people were doing a lot of in comics at the time, your Spider-Verses and things like that. And then by 2025 now it feels kind of old hat, a lot of the things that are going on in this. But 30 years ago this comic was jaw-droppingly cutting edge. It was groundbreaking in so many ways. But Jmike, so often when we talk about these kind of works that are ones that I'm bringing to the table, I often throw your direction to say, hey, could you try to give the elevator pitch for what this comic is about?
Well, how can I describe this book? I want to say acid trip, but...
Oh no, it's not that. It's not Swamp Thing.
It's not Swamp Thing. No, it's it starts off like exactly like Into the Spider. What is it? Which one was Spider-Verse Part 2? That was Into the Spider-Verse or Across the Spider-Verse?
Across.
It starts off just like that, where he like comes back into this universe and he's like seeing double of everything, and then there's doppelgangers of him coming to greet him, and he's like, I don't understand what's going on, and he's like, well, I guess I'll just punch my way out of this. And they're like, no, we're your friends. They take him to the Spider Society, or the Supreme Society, where they meet like all the other variations of Supreme. And he's like, I don't understand what's going on, but sure, this seems kind of cool. And they're like, don't worry, you'll understand. There's something called the revision that happened, and it's messing with time across realities. And we all kind of like end up here for some reason. And they're like, cool, but we're going to send you back now because you still have stuff to do. And they send him back, and he's a comic book writer. I was like, okay, I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know he was a comic book writer, Case.
Comic book artist. I'll just correct you on that one.
Artist,
just because that plays into the important relationships for him.
Which was a weird arc. Yeah, he goes back and he's back in his comic book artist days. What happened next? I don't know. It was a bunch of stuff that happened after that.
We're gonna go by issue. I'm just saying, like, what's the the bird's eye view description of this series? Like,
it's like Superman, but with like a bunch of other things tied in. It felt like, honestly, reading this felt like a version of All-Star Superman where it has like 15 other time or storylines going on at the same time, and they all dodge across different parts of his life, I want to say. Because a lot of these are going back to like the 1930s and 40s, and like, remember that one time when we fought this person?
So that is a key thing that you brought up, and you brought up actually 2 points that I wanted us to address. One is a comparison to All-Star Superman, which is that, so for me as a Morrist, in terms of the Moore-Morrison divide, like, I would argue that this is Alan Moore's equivalent story. This 12-issue arc is him doing an opus on the nature of Superman, but it's by way of this thinly veiled Superman knockoff that had been bumming around for 40 odd issues up until this point.
Is it really thinly veiled? Because I feel like it's like very heavy-handed. Like, hey, this is Superman, but just another version of Superman.
The thinnest of veils, we'll say. So I think there is a valid comparison there in terms of like, I mean,
because he's even got the parents in like a little small town.
No. Like there's no like it. This is just Superman. Like, this is just Superman. Like there's
okay. I gotta jump in here because I don't know how much you know about pre-Supreme. To me, this read a little bit like, Alan Moore's kind of a goof. As serious as we all take him, he's kind of a goofball in his writing sometimes. And so there was a part of me that felt like he was taking things that maybe the original writer, and I'm guessing here, I don't know, like maybe the original writers were kind of thinly veiling, as you said, Jmike, but he was being like, no, let's be obvious about it. This is a knockoff, and here's what I have to say about it.
That is exactly his take on how he came into this book.
Because that's how it feels to me.
Yeah, so that's the thing. We'll talk a little bit about the history of the character. So Supreme was a Rob Liefeld creation. Yes, that Rob Liefeld, the one with the Captain America picture that is like weird proportions guy.
Oh, that guy? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, cool.
So he's a Rob Liefeld creation who was introduced first in Youngblood, which was the teen book that he launched Image with. And by launched Image, I mean, like, was literally the first Image comic was Youngblood. But that whole group of, like, Todd McFarlane with Spawn and Eric Larson with Savage Dragon and Jim Lee with Wildcats, like, Youngblood was Rob Liefeld's like launch book for that, and it was very clearly Teen Titans. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to indicate that it was a lot of stuff that Rob Liefeld had worked on as a Teen Titans pitch prior to going off to doing his own Image thing. And you can see comparisons with like Speedy / Arsenal being, God, is it Quiver? I'm blanking on the name of the Archer character. Shaft is the character in Youngblood. Sorry. So it's all these like knockoff characters in it, and like Liefeld loves making knockoff characters. Like his little corner of Image Comics when he launched it was like loaded with Wolverine knockoffs and and Cable knockoffs and all these kind of characters that were just like things you'd already seen, and this includes Superman. And so Supreme was his attempt at creating a Superman character where he described in the foreword to the first issue that it was a Superman who was way, 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 way more powerful than what had really been shown in the comics at this point, especially in the 90s where they had the depowered Superman. Liefeld wanted to go like way, way to the point of like unbelievably, unstoppably powerful, but then also have him be amoral as fuck. And so the character was this sort of like asshole who was completely powerful. Like he was as pretentious as his name would imply. And this version of the character kind of was a dick around the Image Comics universe for a few years, like probably about 20 issues of that run. He fought the Image comic version of Thor and took his hammer, and that's why you see a bunch of hammers of Thor in the Supremacy when we see shots of that.
And you're saying this is in the 90s he made this, right?
This is the 90s, yeah.
Okay.
And so then there's a couple other runs. Keith Giffen is on for a while. There's a period where he's like a hyper-religious figure, and that's actually when they have a crossover with Gladiator from Marvel Comics, where he's like, he's like this like the zealot kind of like puritanical kind of preacher type character, a supremacist, as it were. And so we have like different versions of the character. He keeps getting revamped until they finally get Alan Moore to come on with issue 41. And that is a really interesting thing to me in the modern context of a series. Like this shows that like an ongoing series was worth it, that they wouldn't renumber the book starting at that point, like they wouldn't just do an issue 1 with Alan Moore coming on. It was like, no, it's issue 41. Now they would later, because the book does get canceled. I think it's issue 56 is the last issue. And then it gets relaunched about like 3 or 4 months later, and as Supreme: The Return. But then I think they revert back to the original issue numbering at a certain point. And they certainly are on that issue numbering by the time the book gets canceled, and then like 15 years later gets picked up by Eric Larson at Image again after it had gone off to its own publishing. Eric Larson writes his own version of the conclusion of the arc that Alan Moore had written a certain amount of, but had been left unfinished.
Oh, okay.
So the series has like this whole weird lifestyle or life beyond this, but like it goes for a long time in that sense. Like a huge number of years with big gaps in there, but it's like 70 issues is like the total run of the book, and Moore comes on with issue 41 and runs for about 24 issues.
Okay.
With that first arc being this whole, I'm going to start from scratch, and I'm going to take everything that was notable about this character and just throw it out the window. He does respect a lot of things. He keeps the identity of Ethan Crane. He alludes to Loki several times in this, which was the villain of the previous arc. There are certainly like character names that are referenced and adorned. And then in the first issue, we also see like the supporting cast that he had around him at the time, which was Kid Supreme and then Lady Supreme. Kid Supreme is a character who was like a Captain Marvel Jr. type character. Like he was like drawing power from Supreme, and he's a straight up Superboy knockoff, like the 90s Superboy knockoff with like the leather jacket and everything. He has a leather vest.
Man, that's so crazy.
Yeah. And then Lady Supreme is like a future daughter version of Supreme. So like, again, like it's hard to talk about this character without getting into this like archetypal nature of everyone, which is what Alan Moore then plays into for the book. So the book, it goes from being, here's a 90s extremist kind of commentary on Superman to being like, no, let's just do like a real Silver Age nostalgia piece and look at comics from the lens of the whole history of comics as if you were Superman living inside that world, aware that you're in a fictional world that's being rewritten constantly. And that's what I think is like so fascinating about this book, because even though there's all these elements that now like don't like really don't hold up in terms of being a novel concept. Like we're all so sick of multiverses. We're so tired of seeing like this many like versions of the same character like pop up, because now they're doing it. At the time that wasn't the case. And I should note, yesterday I went to see Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse in concert at the National Theater, like with a full orchestra doing the soundtrack for it. And the whole damn time I'm thinking like, man, tomorrow I am going to have to talk about how this movie is so similar to the comic that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I think that's in broad strokes. I think that the actual comic itself, once we get into it, is more about the history of comics and this like deconstruction of that and reconstruction, this real embrace of like just how cool it all is. So I think there's a lot to talk about there. I think that the art is a mixed bag in this all. The main artist is Joe Bennett, who would go on to be an acclaimed artist on I believe the Immortal Hulk run.
Yeah. That run is insane and looks crazy.
Yeah. But that said, he I believe has said some shitty things.
That's right.
Years. Yeah,
yeah.
But like he's certainly trying to do the Image house style at the time. In fact,
Yeah.
what's wild, and this is the thing that made me really go like, oh, it's weird thinking about the individual issues here, because the artist that becomes the most associated with Supreme only has one issue in this collection.
Okay.
But after this arc ends, the artist going forth is Chris Sprouse, who does issue 50, the issue, like the date issue with Ethan and Diana, with the much more like relaxed proportions or realistic proportions characters. That becomes the house style for the character going forth. And so the book becomes like notable for having like a really good penciler working on it like after that point. But that first 12 issues are all over the place in terms of art. There's like different artists in like almost every other issue, like fill-ins in like certain pages and all that.
Was there a consistent artist on the like quote old issues within the issues?
No, because the creative teams kept on moving, like switching over and so forth. I'm not even sure if when Keith Giffen was working on it, if he was the penciler, or if he was just writing. I'd have to look into it.
So they all just kind of did that style?
Well, so there was like this Rob Liefeld house style where like they were all trying to emulate Rob Liefeld's look in the early issues. I know it wasn't him. I know it wasn't Liefeld himself doing most of the penciling. And it was sort of like he had a team of people that were doing like Liefeld-esque drawings for the characters. And then at some point it switches over to then this sort of era of Image style, which is a little bit different. It's, this is, they're aping more like an Ed McGuinness in some sense. It's just what has become like the general style of the time has changed. And I've read interviews with Joe Bennett where he talks about how he was really being told like what his art was supposed to look like versus what he wanted it to look like at this time. So I know that there was a lot of pressure if you weren't like a name artist. And so like Chris Sprouse, who would then become the main look for Supreme for the remainder of the run, and then would go on with Alan Moore to create Tom Strong, which is seen in a lot of ways as like the continuation of Supreme. Like that pairing is really strong, but they have like just a totally different style. Like Chris Sprouse is a DC Comics veteran at this point. Like he's instrumental in like the redesigns of the Legion of Superheroes. There it is. Made a reference in this episode. the Legionnaires era in the 5-year gap period, the SW6 Legionnaires. He's a really good artist, and he has continued to do really good stuff. And this was like a cool period where he was doing these like outside books. The other thing that we should note is that this is a book that had a lot of attention from Alex Ross. The cover to the volume that we're holding is an Alex Ross image, and I don't like it.
I don't like it a lot.
I find it so strange that the cover for both this and the second volume, The Return, uses concept art that Alex Ross had done for a proposed new outfit for Supreme that never shows up in the comic. And thus, that's why it's such a weird look for the character.
Meanwhile, he's like balding too, which is strange.
Meanwhile, he did actual promotional art for Awesome Comics, which would become the imprint that this was being published under later in the run. And so he does legit. He does a supremacy shot with like all the Supremes. Like it's this huge, super tall poster design that he did. Like he has several like images of Supreme in his canonical costume, and then the actual published versions never use it. They use the stupid fucking like concept work, which the thing that is crazy. And hey, we're gonna reference Kingdom Come now. The Suprema design is the exact same costume he gives Brainiac's daughter in Kingdom Come, except the colors are different. So in that, it's Brainiac's daughter with Supergirl, and so she is green skinned with yellow hair, so she's got green skin, and then it's like a light pink costume to look kind of like Brainiac's. But it's got the same S design shape that he loves putting in every fucking character that he ever designs the costume for. Like, I love Alex Ross's art, but like if you are aware of this trend, you won't be able to unsee it, which is that when he is responsible for redesigning a character's outfit, he always makes the icon for the character like super big and integrated into the main body of the suit. Like he loves having just like the S for Superman as being a giant sash that goes across, indicating an S. Or like when Hourman in the redesign for Kingdom Come, it's like just like the hourglass is just like the entire half of his torso. Like he loves integrating the symbol into like the overall chest chest of the character, and he's doing that here with Supreme. Again, this is a little mini rant just because it's just annoying. I love the Alex Ross art that uses the canonical work. It's just so weird that they always just use this like this concept art that never went anywhere.
Yeah, and it kind of has a like your dad's friend that's like kind of buff vibe to it. It just looks I really, I mean, when I saw it I was kind of like, what did he give me? Like, right. What is this? I'm gonna have to look at this guy for 200 pages, but then when you open it looks fine. But yeah,
also a bummer that
very strange.
There were a bunch of variant covers for issue 41, the launch of this, and including one which is the actual debut of the design for his costume, which I actually rather like the costume, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it's by Jerry Ordway, who is like an acclaimed Superman artist. He did the Power of Shazam series that we looked at, Jmike. Like he is the writer and artist on that, but he did like those like that awesome watercolored Power of Shazam series, and he did a watercolored version of it's an homage to the original the Superman issue 1, which is like the oval shape with like Superman leaping over Metropolis image. And so it's him leaping out of that image, which I realize now that I'm saying it is very evocative of the style that the Men of Steel episode artwork looks like. So I am a hack.
It all comes together.
It all comes back. So it's a bummer that we had this like great, also painted cover that they could have used that they didn't, is just what I was getting at.
Very odd.
Yeah, the art's a mixed bag in this whole series, and is honestly the biggest detractor. It really messes with character designs. Like, there's a lot of characters that we see different artist takes on, and it is really all over the place. One area, though, where it isn't all over the place is the flashbacks in this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that was the most attention grabbing to look at, if not a bit cluttered, but still pretty fantastic art. And those were my favorite little vignettes. I was surprised at how well I loved pretty much all of them. And the like wry British humor really, really sticks out, particularly in the what's the one with, is it Lady Supreme like turns into the devil or something like that?
Oh yeah, the
Suprema in Hades. I mean, that was like my favorite of the entire run because it was so hilarious and it was like perfectly balanced humor, and then the art was kind of terrifying, but it's in this nostalgic old style. It was like that was where the book really sang for me.
Yeah,
those
so
moments.
Every issue has at least one flashback with art by Rick Veitch, who had collaborated with Alan Moore before on 1963. So they do like really like retro stuff together. And so he does all this, like all these retro pieces throughout. And so during one of the cool things about the Supreme Story of the Year, this 12-issue arc, is that each issue has a flashback to the period of time in comics that we are discussing in the issue. And we see it from the lens then in this flashback with art that is done extremely well to be evocative of that particular period, including like the 70s period looking like the polyester years Superman, like with like the sideburns and everything going for him, versus like the the 50s style looking more like a Dick Sprang, like or a Wayne Boring kind of thing, or like more Kurt Swan when we're talking about like 60s material. So it's a really nice element there that is great at unifying a lot of the character designs, especially because like when you see some of them by other artists, they feel more like they are falling victim to the image excesses of the 90s. I'm thinking about Corgo the Space Bully / Space Tyrant especially, but like there's all kinds of ones.
This art does not do it justice now that I'm looking back on certain pages.
No, it's a bummer because like if you ever see an Alan Moore script, like he has like a page dedicated to every panel basically, and there's so much description going into everything. It's just wild.
Well, and I also found that like, well, I'll say a couple things about this element. Is I do feel like the action was confusing to read and to understand. But it felt like it was deliberately obtuse, that there was not an intention for the action to be something that you followed and were excited by. But I don't know if you guys agree with that. That's just how I felt. felt like Alan Moore was not interested in that.
Yeah, I don't think many of the fights were really supposed to be that big. Like they have one spot that like when they show the flashback to the hypothetical marriage of Supreme with Glory.
Yeah.
And they have a shot in there which looks like a straight up homage to the end of his Miracle Man run, where like you see like people running in fear, and it's colored very much like that sort of like horrible shot of London with everyone like dead. Like there is a little bit of an acknowledgement that like violence of superhumans is terrible. And so they do try to avoid having too many fights like that. When they come up in the series as a whole, it's usually very much of Supreme, like, we got to get this out of the way. Like, can't.
Yeah.
Or it's like a single punch and then move on is usually how it goes for these characters. But I like that as an element of this all. Like, when the series was coming out, we have to remember that this was the Triangle era of Superman contemporarily. So it was, circa the death of Superman. And so that power level was the character, where he was very much a superhero that was akin to what was common for Marvel and DC, just at the highest end of that spectrum. He didn't have the crazy out there Superman stuff that he had in the 60s. His power level was way more restrained. His Fortress of Solitude was way more like sci-fi explained by Kryptonian technology kind of stuff. He didn't have like the pantheon of like his animal menagerie or the backstory of a mermaid love interest in college, or any of those things were stripped away from the character. So to have this be this exploration of like all the weirdness of Superman was also like a big thing for me, because at the time we weren't getting that. That is different in today's era, where a lot of the classic Superman stuff is back in vogue. But this was one where it was very much trying to be like, remember all that weird shit? And one of those things that's included in there is that the power level of the character means that the fights themselves are, generally speaking, irrelevant. Like Supreme is either fighting a thing that is outside of his ability to fight, like Goral the Living Galaxy, or it is a thing that he's obviously going to win.
Right. It's interesting because I don't know that I think I picked up on that. I'm not sure that it totally lands the plane on it, outside of being in the specific moment of when this comic came out. I think looking back on it, I do wish that not necessarily like more punches, but just clearer action would maybe excite me a little bit more.
I think that's fair. I think that the art is not necessarily doing it justice in terms of fight choreography. Yeah. And usually the fights are pretty fast.
Yeah, very
fast.
Right.
and I find it interesting that so when I started reading this, like if you just put Miracle Man, which I also read this year, Supreme and Watchmen, and just story-wise told me to read them and not look at the art. I mean, you have to, but for the sake of this experiment, I would think that this is like a warm-up, and then Miracle Man like takes the ball and runs with it, and then Watchmen like finishes the thing off. So I was very surprised to learn that this is like pretty later on in Alan Moore's career, because it feels like, especially after just reading Miracle Man, this felt like it's doing a lot of what he's doing in that book. But and by the way, I liked this. I enjoyed this quite a bit. I'm just talking about it.
Yeah. Sorry, I realized we didn't give you like a runway to be like, what were your thoughts? Like, we just like jumped into it. Sorry, I love this book, so it's like hard.
Yeah. But it did feel like this was just kind of a lesser Miracle Man, I have to say. Then a lot of the things that you said that make it unique, I think just as a modern comic and movie watcher and stuff, are now things that aren't quite as unique, like the multiverse element and that kind of meta commentary. But I feel like the meta commentary is even in Miracle Man, with like the way his character becomes who he is by keeping in canon all of his old issues and stuff. Yeah. So that was interesting. I'm not even saying bad. Just it was interesting that this was the latest of those three kind of commentaries on comics, taking old characters, revamping them, that I know of Alan Moore anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is coming. It's coming 10 years later, and is doing it. What I would argue is that this is doing the reverse job of Miracle Man, because it's
Okay.
saying, okay, now we have embraced this world where we can see all the grim and grittiness, and we can see the deconstruction of the tropes, and that we can acknowledge that, like, yeah, the Superman is a terrible thing that will ultimately distance themselves from humanity and will destroy our drive to even advance just by the nature of its existence. Like, there's this whole element of Miracle Man where it's like, well, yeah, he kind of becomes a god and humanity kind of becomes irrelevant. This is trying to say, well, sure, but like, what if we're still having fun with the character? What if all of that is still not like out of the question? You know, this is argued as like the reconstructionist approach to comics as opposed to a deconstructionist approach. So it's saying, it's taking that the advancements that Miracle Man and Watchmen did in terms of comic book writing, you know, have been addressed, and this is saying, like, well, now where do we go even further? And we go even further to the point by having it be a world where the character is aware that revisions in comic books occur, and that to a degree that he's not self-aware like Deadpool or like She-Hulk, but that the nature of his existence is very much like a comic book to him, and that the fact that he works as a comic book writer or as a comic book artist is relevant, because then we have all this like meta text of like his day job bleeding into the same things that he's doing, or like the discussions of like how the issues flow and things like that. I'm particularly thinking about the Diana Dane issue where like they talk about all the story beats as it would happen, and we're just like witnessing it like live. Like you're practically reading the script like as the whole thing goes, and there's a lot of that going on in the comic as a whole. I don't want us to like take forever, so I do want us to like hit each of the issues. So
sure.
we're not going to go into like a full breakdown of each issue, but we will give our basic thoughts. Like here's a summary, and here's our basic thoughts on each issue, because I think there's a lot going on for each one, and I don't want us to overlook anything because there is really cool stuff even in the middle of it all. So, starting with issue 41. So this is the start of the revisions of it all. And so, as we've alluded, there's the Supremacy, which is this like Valhalla for revised versions of Supreme.
Limbo.
Yeah. And so that is one distinction. So it is not a multiverse story in the sense of they have their own realities to go home to. They do not have realities to come back to. There's this meta element even beyond this all, which is that the character is the published Supreme. Like, this is still the same Supreme that had those 40 issues prior, even though his story is being rewritten at this point. This is still that Supreme. And so from the perspective of we, the audience, we are still reading Supreme. And that is why this character is special in that regard. Like, he is not one of these myriad characters like Original Supreme, who is like the original Superman who leaps an eighth of a mile, or Squeak the Supreme Mouse, who is like Mighty Mouse, and God fucking damn it, like you gotta love Squeak the Supreme Mouse.
I mean, yeah, you can't. You gotta give it up.
Yeah,
he's. You know, I found myself in my little brain. You know, the inner dialogue. That's the word. Anytime there was Supreme labeled things, it was like a little mental gymnastic I had to go through, where it was like Suprematons. That's it. And then like Supreme House, and it's good and it's funny, and I actually enjoyed that element of it. But oh my gosh, there were so many things where I'm like, how do you pronounce this? How do you pronounce this?
Yeah. So in this issue, we get all these like alternate possible versions of Supreme, and it's all references for the most part to Superman stories. There are some just like general comic references in there. There's like what appears to be the Thing at one point when they show a crowd shot of all the Supremes. So there's a lot of different like types, but they set up this idea that like reality keeps revising itself and replacing the version of the character who is the main character of the story effectively with updated ones, and that explains the continuity changes that we're familiar with from the comics perspective. So like Superman could originally just leap instead of fly. This is a story that explores that character existed, and then he gets written out along with all these like other changes to his version of his like timeline and so forth. Later we see that his version of Darius Dax, actually, who was just Dax, was bald with a red beard to emulate the fact that Lex Luthor was a redhead initially in his first appearance, and then later was a bald character. Everything is allusions to something in this all. I like how the art style does do a lot to at least have the more modern Supreme versus the other characters look like different art styles. Like Supreme, when he's right next to like the Supreme, or like King Supreme, like the type of shading that is going on is like distinctly different. Like, and supposed to one look like a Silver Age character versus one look like here's a modern 90s character. But the majority of the story is just him going to this Valhalla, him being told like, oh, but you're actually supposed to go back and then experience a new story. And that's the first time this has ever happened, because it is the first time that this has ever happened in the world of Supreme. Like in that comic, like this is the first time we're seeing the revision process happen, and not just like picking up from scratch. And it baits us for the next issue where he comes out and he's working at Dazzle Comics, which is obviously DC Comics. And
yeah.
We find out that his version of Perry White is Lucas Tate, this creepy editor who like tries to hit on Diana Dane, who is his Lois Lane character. She's the writer on Warrior Woman. And then his Jimmy Olsen is Billy Friday.
Well, and you know what? Here's and I know you're an Alan Morris, and I do love Alan Moore, but he has a trope in his writing that he still got it in here. He still got it on the bingo card, but he didn't have an actual scene of it, which I was thankful for. And it is a mature warning here, but his stories always have a lot of rape in them. And I was so relieved that this story did not. There was only mention of a comic book writer trying to write a scene with rape, and I felt like that had to have been him kind of acknowledging himself. I hope, at least. Yeah, it's almost like a crutch, I think, to his writing. Sometimes it works, and I think often it does not work and is like way overused. But I was so glad it was not in this story, because it would feel so out of place.
Yeah, that's not the kind of book he's doing. I mean, he does have a character like Billy Friday, who is supposed to be this like British writer, arguably a composite of all the British invasion of the 90s. If you want to read into it, it might be more digs directed at Morrison, but I think
okay.
I think there's also like self-reflective digs as well in that all. Like,
yeah,
the fact of the matter is he's poking fun at his own work throughout this whole book. So it makes sense to me that Alan Moore would put a bit of himself in Billy Friday, even if he's also saying that like, yeah, and all the other guys too.
Right. Well, and I did see, because I did a cursory glance, because when I first read it, like you said, Jmike, I was like, where is this? Who is this character? So I did a cursory glance that was not as thorough as what you gave us, which helped a lot. But I did see that Alan Moore was interested in doing this because he didn't think it was good at all and wanted to do it. And then he also thought that he wanted to do something that was kind of against his type of taking something, making it really realistic, really gritty, really graphic. And he did not want to make something really graphic, which is incredibly interesting when everything I've read by him is incredibly graphic. I mean, that's his thing, right? And so it was interesting seeing him do that. And I think often successful and often not successful. I mean, it's very a mixed bag in this book.
Yeah, this is arguably the start of the Alan Moore apology tour that would continue with this America's Best Comics run, which was him looking at the state of comics post Watchmen and saying, whoops, I fucked up. Or sorry, it's more of a whoops, I fucked up.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like how he, from my understanding, how he feels about the Killing Joke, where he's like, dang, I wish I hadn't written that, because it like ruined comics.
Right, exactly.
Which was, it's always cool when you read something or when you experience something and you don't like it, and then you find out the artist doesn't like it, and you're like, oh, okay. Because I remember reading The Killing Joke and I was so excited about it, and then I finished it and I'm like, huh, I really didn't like that. And then he's like, I don't like it either, and I wish I hadn't wrote it.
Yeah. Again, Alan Moore is at this point coming off of he at this point had just done Wildcats, which is a really fun era for him, but he that's another deconstruction of Superman archetype, because he's dealing with Mr. Majestic as this like ancient warrior who has been celibate the whole time and is this like stoic figure, and also kind of an asshole because he's so dedicated to his mission of being like lawful on the lawful good spectrum. So yeah, this is him being like, we can have fun too, like we can have a gosh darn good time. And I think that carries us into issue 42, because issue 41 has this like launching point of like the cool multiversal, all these references to Superman, which again, in 1995, like we weren't just inundated with like the ability to research this stuff about the character. Like,
sure, yeah.
Like knowing that Superman had these different eras and permutations was kind of rare at the time as well. And so like this was like a real history lesson as much as anything else. But moving on to issue 42, that's where we get like the real history lesson for the character, where we see the analog for Smallville, which is Little Haven. We see the backstory for the character where he is exposed to the radioactive aura of a meteor that crash lands, and that is something that we're going to circle back to.
What?
And that's what gives him and his dog superpowers, and he becomes a Superboy type character called Kid Supreme. Well, first the Supremite, then Kid Supreme. He goes off and becomes the full named Supreme, circa World War II. And so this is a character who lives the entirety of time between the start of comics up until the then current 90s era for the character. We deal with like him having his equivalent to the Legion of Superheroes. We have his equivalent to Lana Lang in Judy Jordan. We see so we also are introduced to the old version of Judy Jordan and her granddaughter.
Oh, that's
Hilda.
kind of important.
Yeah, just a little bit important.
Just a little bit.
What did you guys think when you first were introduced to her?
Yeah, go ahead, Jmike.
I was like, because like they gave like hints to like her from earlier on, and I was like, oh, I guess because of like the time thing, she doesn't remember him and he doesn't really remember her. So I was like, cool. And I was like, but where'd the girl come from? Because she was never mentioned. And then later on, I was like, oh.
Well, if for me, I just felt like, we're the first 2, even maybe 3 issues, we're just kind of like looking back on his life, and he's like reintegrating into society. So I just thought, oh, this is sweet. Here's this person from his past. You know, it's just kind of like we're catching up with him. At the end of the story, though, I'm like, oh, I bet there were so many obvious hints that I should have picked up on.
Yeah, fun. It's a fun character who definitely like it slips under the radar if you're not really paying attention, but it's really well inserted there.
Yeah, no, I liked that whole payoff and element a lot. I thought that was really great.
Yeah, I love that this issue starts off the. We'll just say this part out loud here because we're now 50 minutes into the episode. The time loop part of this whole episode, which reminder, this book came out before Superman Red Sun. It comes out long before a lot of these things doing this like time loop. But we introduce it with the League of Infinity, where we see Supreme in the future waving down at his past self, and
what,
it's like,
you mean they have their own kid group from the future?
Right. Well, yes, of course. Of course. There is no question that anything is like supposed to be a nod to a DC comic staple of things. In fact, a lot of the things that are nods to DC comic staples of things are sort of like the prototype versions of what Superman would have. Like the Shadow Supreme is like the negative Superman, which is the prototype of Bizarro.
And he has his own Phantom Zone projector, but it's like a glass that he can like be flipped on the other side of. And I was like, what is happening?
Yeah. This is a good time to mention that the trade paperbacks that we were looking at, because only a couple of these issues are available on like the Kindle app now. The first issues 41 and 42, and then like I think it jumps over to the Supreme the Return is the next issue that actually is like on the app. The trade paperback sucks. Like the printing is terrible. The color correction is really not very good, and it's missing a bunch of like side stories and stuff. So there is a
really?
We actually do see the origin of the Hell of Mirrors. It is literally an Alice in Wonderland mirror dimension, or Alice Through the Looking Glass, pardon me. It's just a different section of Through the Looking Glass that he's like cordoned off to be his like his prison that he uses for space tyrants.
Man, that's interesting.
Yeah. We also miss a baseball game that takes place in the Supremacy that features heavily
Squeak
the Supreme House and Grim 80s Supreme.
Oh man, that feels like we really missed out.
Yeah.
So maybe I should save this for the last issue, actually. But are we talking about the League of Infinity yet? Are we at that point?
Yeah, we mentioned them just now.
Okay, I thought we did. So many words thrown out, so many nouns or adverbs. Yeah, this is another one, another element when we're introduced to them where I was like, okay, we are like ripping and roaring, because I loved the League of Infinity. I loved these insane concepts that they're telling us about, like, all the time travel and all of this wild stuff while they're doing this, like, gee golly, mister, I hope we can use our awesome powers. And all of that stuff and the way that it's married together, I think is pretty fantastic, and was just like, oh yeah, I am on board during all of that kind of stuff. So good.
Yeah, the way they use the League of Infinity as each one of them having a power that is relevant to emulating Supreme is really fun there. It's really fun. Like using Kid Achilles as the one that's flying around, and which winch is controlling him with magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. This arc of Supreme is the launching point of Alan Moore being allowed to like redesign Rob Liefeld's little corner of comics at this point, because Liefeld leaves Image after issue 42, which is one of the reasons why those are the only 2 issues that are available on the app. And so he then goes off and has his own like publishing company for a stretch there. So to keep it going, he tells Alan Moore, like, you can just design my universe, and that's why some of the story arcs happen in here, and it turns it into this like homage to like DC Comics for a little bit of time that has this much like larger universe. They do like a bunch of crossover events like Judgment Day, and there's like a couple of books that he like starts to work on that all like kind of fall apart because of budget reasons. But yeah, this is the starting point of Alan Moore like rebuilding a grim 90s comic universe from scratch.
That's crazy. So, okay, let's see. Are we at the, I think my second favorite issue is this chapter 4. Are we at chapter 4?
Chapter 3, issue 43.
Chapter 3 still.
Is
okay.
So we're just coming to this. So this is when Supreme, now having been reminded that he has the Citadel Supreme from the previous issue.
Right, yes.
Actually goes back to it, and we see living inside the Citadel Supreme what is this like weird flashback of his life in Little Haven with his parents, and then like Judy Jordan, his Lana Lang equivalent, and him living this like happy Pleasantville style life. And it turns out that it's actually S1, his like main Suprematon, his main Superman robot, just acting out life as if he was Supreme this whole time, which might be a way of justifying Supreme's appearances prior to issue 41, because he was a regular character in Image Comics.
Oh, sure.
Or you could argue that it's just the revisions sort of messing with people's minds. Like Glory references it later. It's like, didn't we just have a team up? When it's like, oh, I'm back finally from space. Yeah. Again, there's a big don't worry about it like effect going on here because of the revisions. But you could argue that maybe the Suprematons are the justification for it. We are also reminded that Ethan Crane is an artist for Omni-Man, which is yet another level of Superman illusions going on there. And in some ways, even more direct. Like Omni-Man has a mermaid girlfriend, for example, which is just straight up Superman. Like that's just doing Superman right there.
I mean, but Supreme kind of dated that one girl who was an angel.
Yep.
So, I mean,
no, I know. Like again, Supreme is just Superman. Like I'm just saying that there's a level of like where Omni-Man is even more just Superman. On that note, what did you guys think about the Citadel Supreme?
What did I think about the Citadel Supreme?
I mean, it was interesting. I like the fact that he had to like charge up his hands with static electricity to open the door. Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool part. Like, again, these are like, how do we take the like stuff from Superman and like do a twist on it? And like for the Fortress of Solitude key, like the giant key that Superman would pick up, I like this as a different version where it's like, oh, his version of it is like he has to have invulnerable hands that can rub together at super speed to create lightning that opens the door. I'm like, that feels appropriately like Silver Age right there.
See, and go ahead.
And then like this is the issue that opens up like all the weird shit that's in the Citadel Supreme, like the prison world of Amaranth, or the well, I mean everything. It's just like it's a cool space.
See, and so I think that some of this, I mean, I think that especially hearing the way you guys are talking about this, I do think there's a lot of this book that, as someone who has read very little Superman, and by the way, I very much like Superman and want to love Superman. I just don't have, I have a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, not DC. So, got to pay the bills. But having said that, I'd actually love some recommendations of some good Superman runs from both of you before we get off for me to check out. Because everything I've read, I really enjoy. And he's like, he's the original. But I do think some of this stuff like the Citadel Supreme and well, I'll just speak to that because I can't think of anything else at the moment. I do feel like a little bit of the references and like the power of the reveal of that is maybe a lot more exciting if you're a Superman fan and know Superman stuff. So to me, I'm just like, oh yeah, he's got, a base, a little fortress, whatever. So when you asked me how I felt about it, I was like, I don't know. I didn't really, it's a place he was at for more plot stuff to happen. It wasn't like, dramatic to me really in any sort of way.
No, that's totally fair. And I think from where I am curious of Jmike's thoughts about it are from this experiment of us doing this podcast and exposing him to all this like Superman lore over the years and how that is perceived. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the actual like nature of issue 43, like the main stuff is to just sort of do a classic like reminder of back in the day when Superman had like, robot duplicates of all of his friends, and that he had this like crazy fortress of solitude, and with all these like funky things going on with it, and the kind of pranks that he and his friends would like play on each other, like the way that the Allies play it on him. Like, it's all very retro themed. I think the only thing that's like a little bit off is that the Allies are like an active participant, which Batman, yes, like the rest of the Justice Society would be unlikely to just pop up in a Superman book back in the day. But it still felt like fun to see this team, especially because this is before we get like a formal introduction to the team. Mm-hmm. And they do that a lot in the flashbacks. Like we see a thing that we'll later like get a better look at in like the modern day stuff, just so that we're like kind of aware of what's looping in. But it turns out that there's basically just this robot simulation of his life going on here. And it's kind of sad for everyone involved because S1 is like malfunctioning. He shouldn't be behaving this way.
He shouldn't have free will.
And everyone else is like kind of just like sad to realize that they're robots. Like they didn't realize it and they were just like happily like in this sort of like simulation. And especially like the Judy Jordan one is like very upset about it all. I will say that there are dividends to this issue in the later part of the run, which neither of you are probably going to read. So I'll just like blow. I'll throw this one out there, which is that the S1 and the robot Judy Jordan, which then gets the actual Judy Jordan's consciousness transferred into it, elope and like set up a world of their own where they have robot babies.
Whoa! Yeah, wacky.
There's a whole issue about it. But that said, this issue is mostly notable because
wait. So they found her consciousness?
Yes, they hint at it at the end. But
did they do the Inception thing and have to go through like the different layers of thought reality? They go pull her consciousness back to our reality.
We'll talk more about it later, but yeah, ultimately they did it. And then from a practical standpoint, though, the most important part of this issue is that the drawing of Supreme gets put up on his refrigerator wall.
Yes,
in Supremacy or in the Citadel Supreme.
Which, I mean, looking back, another funny thing where it's like they keep showing this drawing the whole time. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, that's a reminder of, that little girl and the innocence of childhood, and what she means to him is what I'm thinking every time it's brought up. And I mean, yes, I think that's part of it. That's what you're supposed to think the first time. But then you find out that Dax has put like his robot stuff on it to destroy Supreme, and you're like, oh, okay. So you were the whole time just showing us actually a loaded gun throughout this whole book, and I had no idea.
Yep. Chekhov's gun. Chekhov's
yeah, it was pretty cool. I like that. Chekhov's childhood drawing. That's the new phrase. Yeah.
So next up, chapter 4, we get the Golden Age nod, where we get to see, and actually this is not even like a proper Golden Age nod so much as a transition from Golden Age to like the 50s, like EC Comics era, where we get so we get a nod to the Justice Society coming together. And then we see in flashback their last real mission, which is when they were visited by 3 horror hosts, like the EC Comics horror hosts, like the Crypt Keeper. So they do 3 EC Comics parodies. So it's like a Crime Doesn't Pay parody, a Tales from the Crypt parody, and then a Mad Magazine parody, which is a direct parody of the Super Duperman cartoon from the 50s. In the form of Supreme Melvin, it's so spot on perfect a nod to this Mad Magazine, like this famous Mad Magazine Superman parody comic that Alan Moore's just having a lot of fun here is what I'm getting at.
I absolutely loved this issue. And I think this is another moment where the meta, because I think there's parts of the meta-ness of this comic that don't work for me, mostly, again, because we've seen it so many times. So, like, having the context of how you've put it, I think I give this comic a lot more grace than on this first read-through.
Yeah.
But this part, I just loved this whole idea where these horror icon, prototypes are coming to the Allied Supermen, and they're saying, yeah, you fought off all this stuff, but what are you going to do about, like, nuclear fears? And the growing drug problem, and like wives who are killing their husbands because they're tired of being, the quote lower, sex. Obviously, women and men are equal. But I mean, that's what the comic is, hinting at and stuff. My gosh, all of this, the art is incredible, and then them just being like, yeah, we can't save like moral depravity. We can't punch. Yeah. I loved this.
It's such an elegant explanation for why this group would fall apart. Like why superheroes like this would fall out of favor, and in the sense that like superhero comics fell out of favor during this time and were replaced by horror and crime comics. And so how do we make that make sense in a world where these stories are true? And it's that literally this world of grim and grittier books and so forth that the audience like was gravitating towards was too depressing for the people involved. Like the superheroes are like, I can't, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Like the police chief is a KKK man.
Yeah. I mean, this is just like, again, I've said this phrase, I think twice now. This is when the book's really singing for me. And it's just hitting on all cylinders, and I'm like, okay, I see why this book was sitting on my doorstep. This is great. And again, the art, I love the horror art of it, and the just exaggeration. It's all so good. I mean, this panel where the kid is shooting up is unbelievable. Yeah. What a wonderful panel. And his veins are like popping, and it's just this huge light source from below. Oh my gosh. That's so good. That is so good.
Yeah. What did you guys think about the Allied Supermen of America as a Justice Society parody? I am assuming that you guys are not familiar with which ones were pre-existing characters and which ones were invented for this. So we'll go down the list. Glory was a pre-existing character. She was always a Wonder Woman knockoff. That part should not be a surprise. Mighty Man is a pre-existing character. Die Hard's a pre-existing character. Super Patriot's a pre-existing character. Doc Rocket and Alley Cat are invented for this, as is Storybook Smith and Jack-O-Lantern. And Waxy Doyle, which is my fucking favorite because it's a Sandman parody, like the 40s Sandman.
Oh, wait, which guy?
Waxy Doyle.
Oh, which page is he on? I'm forgetting.
He first shows up with Mighty Man. It's right before the Supreme Melvin page.
Oh, okay. I gotta look. I mean, hey, I love me some Sandman.
Yeah, because like he was like, what was I thinking? Trying to fight like villains with wax.
Yeah. Right, just as a nod to the 40s Sandman, which fought villains with knockout gas.
Oh, that's too good.
Yeah. Oh, and then Black Hand is also originated for this. And I love that idea of him having shadow puppet powers. Like, that's so cool. Yeah.
I feel like I've seen Glory somewhere else before.
Yeah, Glory's pre-existing.
She looks very familiar.
Yeah, she's pre-existing, and she has gone on to be very popular separately. Like there was a really big run about 10 years ago now that recontextualized her as this sort of like genetically engineered super soldier kind of character. It was a very interesting, but like a very deconstructionist stance on the character, where like the sort of like beautiful archetype is like her legend as opposed to what she like actually looks like when she's in battle.
Now, unrelated to the comic, you guys notice that I'm just straight whipping out a yo play over here?
I mean, I did. But
I just yo play in a banana. I mean, I had a late lunch, and I'm just thinking the audience would have no idea I'm eating a banana and yo play as long as I don't say anything.
Moving on to the next issue. This is one of the ones that stood out for me just because it was one of the early ones I actually bought. I should note, I have every single issue of this book.
Oh, cool.
I have every issue of the Supreme run. This is one of the ones that I like really like went out there to collect. I started with the Professor Night or Professor Midnight crossover issue, but then went through and like seriously like went from comic shop to like complete my collection here. And this is an early issue that I had. So this is Billy Friday being brought into the Citadel Supreme to see it all. And we get to see more of the weird shit that they like reference in here. We also effectively do a Red Kryptonite episode.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, people like make fun of Superman for being unnoticeable in like regular society. But there's no way that no one has ever realized that this guy doesn't look like Supreme.
Yeah, they make a joke about that at one point, and I forget if it's here or in a later issue.
Later on,
where someone says, it's like, you really do look like him. And it's like, it's the hair.
Yeah. I remember that.
I was like, yeah, his body proportions are like much bigger than Superman's.
Yeah. Especially
on like the first shot of like when Billy is like walking with him into the fortress. And you're like, this dude is a tank.
This issue I really enjoyed as well, and I love the idea that if superheroes were real, like the reporters of the world would be comic book writers, right? Who need to like go and research. Like that's pretty brilliant. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love Billy Friday in general. I love that he gets exposed to Violet Supremium, and that causes him to become elaborate lad as opposed to elongated lad. And in this case, it's this like fractal pattern, like his arms like splitting off, or his arms and legs like splitting off into all kinds of shapes. It's so cool, but it gets back to the whole like it can't like Supreme's challenges are not things he can punch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, in this, it's like, okay, we have an infinitely expanding thing, so how do we like stop it? Like, well, for one thing, we have to make sure it doesn't crack the Hall of Mirrors, because the end is in there, a thing that we never really take in, but is apparently a big deal.
Does that come back in later issues? Past this run, the end?
The end does not fully, but we get a little bit more of him over the course of it all.
Because we just had 2 panels of him in this one, if I remember right.
He's sort of set up as like a dark side type, but we don't really see much more of him.
And this would probably make you guys appalled, but my only experience with Darkseid is a little movie called Justice League.
Oh, no.
So my experience with him is that he's like the lamest villain ever, but I'm assuming that that's just poor writing.
It's extremely poor writing.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the flashback, we get the Supremium Man story, which a lot of work is being done in this whole series to like set up like future plots, because the Supremium Man, the whole fact that there's 2 Supremium Mans is a thing that will pay off later. But in this one, we get the Supremium Man, and he's Violet Supremium, so it's doing things like Red Kryptonite, this, just like with Superman, like transforming into alternate things for 24 hours. And this is a fun tribute there. It's also a good way of setting up why Sally, Supreme's adopted sister, gets superpowers as well, even though she was not exposed to the original Meteor. Or was she?
Da, da, da.
So now that, I haven't looked back on this. Now I know that this is Dax, right?
Yep.
Oh, cool. Well, I hope if they've made it this far, they've been reading.
Yeah, we mentioned there's a time pair, or the time loop. I love that we get this like middle issue where it's like, oh yeah, this is a mid stage in Dax falling backwards through time as he becomes an inert rock.
Yeah, that's cool. It is funny that okay, huge spoilers to find out that Dax, is this guy, and then also becomes the asteroid that first creates Supreme. I was, I think right now, 2024, I get a little sick of how like anytime time travel is introduced, it has to be a loop.
Yeah.
It feels like we need someone needs to come up with like a new storytelling device for that. But again, as you said, putting this into the context of nobody's really doing this, this is kind of mind-blowing, as a first-time experience, seeing that time loop, seeing them wave at Supreme, all of that stuff. I mean, I can imagine if you're reading this back then, you're just like, I can't, it's like the first time you saw Inception or something when you were a kid, and you're just like, what? No one's ever done this, even though there's stuff that's like it, So that is way cool.
Yeah. we get a reminder of the drawing on the wall, by the way, in this issue.
Yep.
And they resolve this. Sets up like a great background plot thread, which is the many tortures of Billy Friday. So he gets sent into the photo world of Amaranth, which is of course a Candor reference, the bottled city, even to the point where there is an equivalent to Nightwing and Flamebird that we will later see in this all, where Supreme goes in and becomes forget exactly. It's like Dr. Dark or something like that is his like code name when he's in Amaranth as a shadow being that terrifies the criminals of this light world. Oh, here at the end of the issue is when he says a lot of people, can't see that myself. Oh, maybe it's just the hair color. Plus he's obviously a lot taller than you, is what they say there. Anyway, so Billy Friday ends up on this like world tour of all the weird bullshit worlds that Supreme has dealt with, like including a reverse time zone, the Hell of Mirrors, and of course the light world of Amaranth and the future. So he just keeps on like getting bounced around, but we just keep hearing about it at this point. Like we're not like witness to his story. They just like give us updates periodically of like, oh yeah, he fucked up here, and now he's over in this place now. He's crashing on Zayla Zorn's couch or whatever. All those like weird shit there. Next up, we've got the Suprema issue.
And this might be my favorite issue. And I don't know what that says about me, but I just found it so hilarious.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, like the Satana crossover or like the...
Yeah. But like all the comic descriptions are great, but this is cracking me up again. See the girl of our dreams humiliated by the hussy from heck as Suprema becomes Satana's slave supreme. And that's another element that really tickled me throughout this whole thing is all the, let me use my shout supreme.
Yeah.
Let me use my vision supreme. And so to do slave supreme feels like such a payoff from how many times they've been saying these. It's too good.
Yeah. And it's funny because this is the issue that has probably one of my favorite looks at like super senses, where when Supreme is trying to track down Suprema, he talks about how he uses his like, he doesn't actually have telescopic or microsight or any of these other like senses. His consciousness just expands. He knows.
Oh yeah.
Like that's a cool sequence there. Also, time loop scenario here because of when he flies at faster than light speed to find Suprema, 3 little shafts of light fly by him, and he pays them no mind as he goes to hunt down Suprema. And that's on the first page of this issue, or second page of this issue, but right before the Suprema flashback story. Then we get this cool concept of Goral the Living Galaxy, which is like straight. I mean, obviously it's like a very like Galactus style kind of thing, or Ego the Living Planet. I think it's a really cool like concept where it's like, oh, you have to be like light years away to even see him. Otherwise you just see the lights. Like which is in its own way a metaphor for like comics, and like where like you could, if you get too close to a page, like the dots of the image like just become the individual like magenta, green, yellow dots that are in like 4-color printing,
Yeah, that's great. And you finally mentioned 2 things I know about: Ego the Living Planet and Galactus. Like I said, I have the Marvel Unlimited app, not the DC one. One of these days, though. One of these days.
But this is the issue that brings back Radar the Hound Supreme, who I fucking love. Like,
Yes, absolutely.
The decision to have him have speakers that allows him to project his thoughts is so good because he talks like a dog the whole time.
Yeah.
Getting back into like the whole like Moore versus Morrison thing. If you're a fan of We Three, there's certainly a comparison you can make with Radar, because it's very much leaning into like what would a super smart dog think like, as opposed to what does a human intelligence on a dog look like.
How did they resolve her being married here at the end?
Oh, they'd like talk.
I did
him out
enjoy
of it,
that, but
the whole situation, they like reason with him.
We can't punch him. Let's use reason and words.
So this is fun.
That's
like,
right.
On the edge of a black hole, they have this like planetoid that is where they're holding Suprema. And because it's on the edge of the black hole, time passes differently. And that's why she hasn't really aged in this whole period. Not to mention the fact that like apparently the Supreme beings don't age in a noticeable way. Like Supreme is still, looks fairly well in his prime, even though he's like 70 years old.
Well, and if the cover would have he's balding and
right,
looks kind of terrible. Not that being bald is terrible. People who know me know I'm a bald man myself, but I shave it. I don't keep the little speaker from the guy in Bespin on Empire Strikes Back thing around my head.
But yeah, they reason with Goral, the living galaxy, and they convince him to go try to find his peers, which are quasars. And that's like a really cool bit of this is Alan Moore types of writing right there, which is that he loves like little bits of science to toss in and be like, here's the thing that I read about, and it'll be a fun thing to allude to, and how it could be like, oh, it's actually the whale songs of galaxies like traveling far away from us. So that's pretty cool. Like, and we get reminded of how cool Goral is when he like travels away from them, where it's like, here's a red shift of light as all the stars like fly away from you until you finally can see this like galactic figure. And then they travel back home. They pass by Supreme on his way there.
Yeah.
And return home where Suprema is welcomed. And it's very much when Supergirl was first introduced, she was like Superman's secret weapon. Like, she lived at an orphanage and like wouldn't go out in public being a superhero. She would like train in secret with Superman. And so they had an issue, which was like her cotillion, or like her quinceañera kind of thing, or like Sweet 16, where she's like comes out to the world and there's like a big parade like on the cover of Superman. And it feels very much like that. The next issue is our world's finest issue. It's actually called The Finest of All Possible Worlds. And we get our Batman here finally. We get Professor Knight and Twilight, and I love her, by the way, as a Robin analog. You don't get too many like good Robin analogs, and here's a solid one. Yeah.
And this is where I guess we have been introduced to Darius earlier when he's in that, when the time that I think it's like issue 2.
Yeah, the second issue we see is flashback
feels like,
to him. Yeah.
This is like a more exploration of Dax here.
Yeah. I also enjoy Jack-a-Dandy as the Joker equivalent.
Well, and you know what is another, I'm realizing through this book how funny Alan Moore is, because again, I just don't think he really gets that much credit for being funny. And it's just like these names of the made up characters are so close to good names, but also so laughably bad. Jack-o'-Dandy. It seems like a name that someone would come up with, but it also doesn't. And I just feel like that is him so intentionally naming them just off. So it's just this goofy Jack-o'-Dandy.
Yeah, well, it
that's
feels
so
like
silly. I love that.
I mean, so he looks like the like he's designed to look like the cartoon from the New Yorker. And all the side shots, like there's all these like profile shots. Like this is the one that really looks like so very funny. Dick Sprang, like who did a lot of like the art for like Batman stuff in World's Finest. And if you look at like the Dick Sprang Joker, like there is also a similarly cartoony kind of style to the character. It's a different style of cartoon, but it is just as much like this, like doesn't look like a real face kind of thing. And I think that it works really well at just being like, I just noticed he has a cocktail shaker in one of the shots when they're talking. Like, I wasn't even paying attention to that. I think it works really well to have this, like, you know, this similar like stylized character in the world of these superheroes. And so we have like a fun power swap story, and that it's cute to see them like both have issues where it's like, oh, if I'm leaping into the heavens, I can't turn off my heat vision, and like Supreme having none of his powers, and they're disoriented and yada yada yada.
Sir, it is called Stare Supreme. Okay.
Yeah, Stare Supreme.
It's not called heat vision. It's Stare Supreme, sir.
Well, I was really surprised, and I'm curious if you guys thought this as well, especially on your first read through, Case. But I would think if I was reading this, if someone told me about this, I would think that all of the old issues, the flashback issues within the issues, I would think that I would want to like blow through those and just get to like the meat. But I found myself, I think upon reflection here, I think I, on the whole, enjoyed the flashback elements maybe even more than like the present day stuff. Like,
I think
it's pretty
that's
well
fair.
written.
I think that's really fair because it is the satire of these older books with much more consistent art.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of really cool stuff going on in each of these flashbacks, and a lot of the story is being told in the flashback. Like, again, Darius Dax is more important in flashback than we see at all in his main story. Like, the modern day Supreme stuff is for the most part him cleaning up the shit that he left behind when he left Earth, and meanwhile we see like the actual confrontation is like coming around in the background.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too it could be that, I'm even though this is a little later than what they're aping on here, but I'm a student of like Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, Steve Ditko. Those are like, that's probably my favorite time period of comics because I'm an Amazing Spider-Man guy. And we're not quite there with these, but I think there's something harkening back to just when there was a little more simplicity, and maybe that's part of the brilliance of this story too, where you have these really simplistic, fun tales, while some of the more complicated stuff up to this date in comics had been written is filling in the gaps. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's all. I guess as we're talking about it, I'm realizing I liked this more than I thought I did. So you're achieving your mission, Case.
I'm an evangelist for this book. So then we get this cool thing. So Professor Knight and Twilight are comatose. They have been that way since the 70s, apparently. They have not breathed, or they have not needed to breathe. They have not needed to eat. They have remained the exact same way in this whole period. And so Supreme tries to enter their mind using what is kind of like an Inception thing, frankly. Yes. Yeah. And he goes in through like his thoughts into like communal thoughts into the actual thoughts of Professor Knight and finds his soul is missing. And I thought, again, this is the first issue of Supreme I ever read.
Oh, okay.
And this is I think a very cool issue in that regard. Like we set up like a cool dynamic with like this Batman type character. And then he's like, his mission is to explore the soul of him by way of entering through the dream time. Like, very cool stuff. Then they set up like, oh, well, it's got to be a villain who probably isn't like one of his like actual villains. It's probably like one of his villains from the Allies. And we introduce what is one of the weirdest little bits of trivia about this, the character of Hulliver Damick / Ramick. And they alternate between the two throughout the rest of the book. They do not know how to spell this character's name.
Oh, yeah.
And we get the alliance of the reunion of the Allies, the 60s version of the superhero team, which is very much the Justice League equivalent of it all. Yeah. And in this case, these are all characters who are existing superheroes in the Image universe or Rob Liefeld's awesome universe at this point, having spun off of Image. And by spun off, I mean everyone had kicked Rob Liefeld out. And he had his own separate studio. So Die Hard Mighty Man is actually Eric Larson's character. He's part of the Savage Dragon universe, as is Super Patriot, who is the Captain America equivalent of the Savage Dragon universe. But Glory and Roman and Die Hard are Rob Liefeld characters.
Now these last two pages where he's on the phone and then the group shows up, if the whole comic, if the art was like this, and I'm not necessarily saying dark, but this is much more striking than a lot of the issues to me. And I don't know, maybe it's just because it is that contrast, but it just feels like this is so much more put together than a lot of the other modern parts of the comic.
Yeah.
And I really like that.
Yeah, this issue has pretty good art.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to deny that.
Who's on this one? Do you know?
It's JJ Bennett on that issue, which I'm not sure if that's Joe Bennett and just like for some reason they named him separately, or if it's actually a separate person. I don't know.
Yeah, that's weird. It's not on the.
But this gets us into then our tribute to the Justice League, and so rather than having flashbacks in this issue, this next issue that comes up, instead we see individual panels, or rather individual covers of their issues, which is so great.
I love these.
Because like the Justice League is like one of those books where the covers are really well known. Like the first appearance of the Justice League when they're fighting Starro the Conqueror, like that they do this like parody of that with the Florax the Dominator.
Oh, what's that issue you referenced by Justice League? I just want to look it up and see. Starro the Conqueror.
Yeah, it's not Justice League 1. It is Brave and the Bold 28.
Oh man. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Wow. That really makes this sing even more. Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah. It makes me think of the article that Mark Waid wrote I think it's the preface to the Squadron Supreme, where he talks about his relationship with Mark Grunwald. And he says that the game they used to play was that they would just like give issue numbers and then describe what was the story of that issue of Justice League. And this feels like that because we're getting like all these like they're talking about their memories of their respective like adventures as a team, and we're seeing that in the form of covers of the different issues, which I think is so fun. Also weird when we get in there, I'm pretty sure that when they get attacked while they're in the mind space, that those are the weird squids from Watchmen. Like they just like look so fucking much like it.
Is that what they were?
They look a lot like it.
Oh. Well, and I just don't want to.
I don't think they're explicitly that. I think that the artist just like aped it.
I don't want us to overlook just this great line of dialogue from the second cover spread. Work harder, my super slaves. Now you belong to Holver Ramek, slave trader of the spirit realm. And then later you have when the guy is petrifying everyone, and you hear the thoughts of choke. Once mighty man has been turned to stone like us, the basilisk will have completed his collection of the allies.
It's such a great. Yeah, or Prismalo the painter, and it like. God, each one of these, like, there's such great tributes to different Justice League stories, but it's mostly like a travel montage.
Yeah.
As they come up, and we find like all these 60s superheroes are frozen in place inside this prism of Hulliver, Ramek / Damek.
Well, and I do really love the idea of subconscious. You go in and at first it's like advertisements everywhere, like Coca-Cola and all of that, where it's like those are the things that we're seeing all the time in life. So they're kind of at our front, the first thing you have to penetrate. Yeah. Then they go deeper and you see like all these religious symbols and stuff, like the deeper part of people. And then they go past that to their subconscious. That is really, really a cool idea.
Yeah, it was so cool in the issue prior, and remains very cool to like see it like drawn out for these disparate characters. And then we get like what is like really fun, which is like a reminder of a team that has both Superman and Captain Marvel would have a really effective front line if they go to war. It's just like, do you want to do the shockwave sandwich trick? There goes Whitey and Mighty. And they're just like ripping through everything because they're, invulnerable, super strong, super fast individuals that can fly. Ramek / Damek isn't ultimately the main villain of this all. It's actually Optilix. And this is one spot where I really wish that we had seen Optilix in the flashback first.
Oh, we saw the gun thing?
We saw the gun, but we didn't see him. Yeah. And I would have really preferred I don't mind him being drawn as just like this big thing of light, especially in the weird realm that they're in. But like, I would have rather seen like the Brainiac looking like mirror reflection character that we would see in the later appearances.
Yeah, I was going to say, we see like him before he converts himself to light much later here. You're like, oh, that's what he looks like.
Well, he is living light there too. It's just like he's drawn to look like Brainiac, but he's like being put like he's a hologram being held together by floating mirrors. And I think that's just such a cooler version than just like this ball of light that they use in this sequence here. Even though the lighting effect, despite the fact that the printing is shit, is like fairly cool in terms of like early 90s gradients. is all I'm saying.
But and I think this speaks to earlier where it's like I don't think he's interested in that with the that Alan Moore's really interested in those details of the fight, or even some of the details of, you know, the villains and looks beyond these flashbacks that are so detailed and have such standout imagery. A lot of the other stuff is just not standout. And I know some of that does fall on the artist, but it does feel like an intentional writing stroke.
Yeah. Well, I mean, then we look at Micah, this next flashback should probably appeal a lot to you, where Supreme the Space Years, like, this looks like, I mean, there's some Steranko in here, but it also like looks kind of Ditko-esque.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's certainly very, very like late 60s, early 70s kind of art. And I mentioned the reference to the polyester years with like the sideburns, but yeah, like this.
Oh yeah,
this has a lot of like Marvel vibe.
Oh, totally. Yeah, this, I forget the Jack of Lanterns is so like Doctor Strange, Steve Ditko. Oh my gosh.
I mean, with the Spectre also rolled in, but yeah.
It's so good. But then it's interesting too how you have like the blood coming out of his chin when he's getting beat up and stuff, which gives it that weird like, oh, but you wouldn't see that back then. Even though it's not that much blood, it's still enough that would have been like, I don't know if they would have done that back in the 60s.
Yeah.
Which I love. I think that gives it this weird kind of uncanny quality. And then this great spread I keep saying spread, but this page that's like psychedelic. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly where I was at. Yeah. It's so good.
Where we see Supreme's brain break. And that's the in-universe explanation for why he has like this amnesia and all these gaps and everything and like all the...
Oh, yeah.
All of that. But it takes a while to get there because the revisions are the main story and the thing that we're thinking about for a while. We don't really care when we get to the like, oh yeah, there is an in-universe explanation. Like the reality is it's the meta explanation, like the narrative that is the thing that is compelling to us.
Well, and this was something that really impressed me with Marvel Man. Like I was kind of mind blown when I was reading that and you were getting revealed of how this character had been dormant for so long, and you were seeing these flashbacks to original issues like recreated and stuff from my memory. That's what they were. And it's just interesting that Alan Moore is so interested in like examining, deconstructing, reconstructing superheroes, but at the end of the day, he's not pulling like a Todd Phillips Joker kind of thing. I never saw the new movie, but thing where he's like, I actively don't like this stuff. That's what Todd Phillips is kind of saying. When I saw Joker 1, I felt like he was saying, I don't like comics, I don't like this stuff, and people who like them are stupid. And Alan Moore isn't doing that. He's like, this rocks. I love this stuff. I don't know that he loves it anymore, but at least when he was writing it, he's like, I love this stuff, and keeping it in universe and having these in universe explanations and not just being like, well, screw what the last writer said, I don't care. It's like he covers his bases. Yeah. He does it all. So for those of us who are on podcasts talking about comic books, we can be like, okay, yes, that is checked. My brain is satisfied. I love that.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I love the clever ways he does things. Like so like Glory and Supreme are wandering through this like desert of this like light hologram that like Optimus has trapped them in. And they figure out where they need to be based on how their shadows are positioned. Yep. Because the light source is different than what they can see because they're inside a hologram. And I think that's really cool. Meanwhile, I would say that this is an area where the art kind of doesn't live up to what probably the description of everything was. Like when Supreme uses his shout Supreme to free all the heroes, like that should be a really dramatic shot. And I think that this is probably an artist taking some easy passes on it all. You can even, and I won't even say the pencil are necessary, because like you can see a lot of outlines of characters that are not colored in. And I just think that this is not an artist team that had a lot of time and they just kind of were rushing out an issue and didn't put the labor into like having, like we see these like shattered tubes with like all these like out or like, little, the silhouettes of like characters. And I get that they probably didn't want to like go super deep in drawing and designing all of these characters because they're not pre-existing characters. They're just references to 1960s DC Comics characters. Like Polyman is like clearly Plastic Man, for example. But like, you know, they're not going to invent everything whole cloth here and get zero credit for it because that's how like for hire comic writing or comic like art works. So it's just kind of a bummer here because it's one where you can imagine what the script looked like to describe, like,
Yeah.
you know, all of a sudden there's like this triumphant image of like all these heroes freed, you know, instead it's just like all of a sudden Professor Knight's just standing in the middle of the room and like out and like,
Yeah.
it's not a very dramatic shot, nor is like the fight against Optilux. I do like that the way they beat him is by Supreme antagonizing him and then trapping him inside a prism. Like,
Yep.
Again, Supreme is a character who is super powerful, except like the only things that he can't fight are the things that he can't fight, like that no one could fight, because how do you fight light?
And then we go to, I mean, right? This is the best issue, right?
The date issue, it's up there.
I mean, I said that the Satana Supreme was my favorite. That's like my asterisk favorite, but I think this one is like the most well-written and most interesting, and it's kind of the best one, I think.
Yeah, so it certainly has the best art. Chris Sprouse is so good.
Yeah,
artist.
yeah.
And like I said, he becomes the regular artist going forward after this book. And for what that's worth, that's like 5 issues. And
Yeah.
And there's like a weird issue later on where like they clearly cut together like the last like 3 pages using like pre-existing panels that Sprouse had worked on like from other issues. And I could like see it's like how they recolored characters, and I'm like, that character's wet. That's why their hair is that way. Why are they using this panel here? Because there were financial issues with this book. Like whoa. But yeah, so there's a couple things going on in this issue. So Ethan Crane, Supreme, is a comic book artist, and Diana Dane has been assigned to work on the Omni-Man book that Ethan is the artist for. And they have this really sexy like planning meeting inside like at Diana's apartment. And they're just, it's really flirty. It's also extremely meta commentary heavy. Like they keep talking about like how they would structure the issue. And like, then the issue just does that structure where it's like, oh, well, we would do flashbacks to like set this whole thing up. And then we'd have like a teaser at the end for for the next issue. That would be like really ominous. And like, sure enough, that's what happens in this issue.
I really, art-wise, I think this issue is, you know, like you said, kind of head and shoulders above the rest. And I'm always a fan of when artists can basically repeat panels and show changing action. So like when you look at the scene where they're on the couch and it's a repeated, you know, setup, but then you see how she's moving around him and then his body and how he's like rigid as she grabs the script that's across from his body. Oh my gosh. That's just great. That's good stuff. Yeah. And there's so much of that. Like at the beginning of this issue, there's that she's on the phone and the you know, the camera, if you want to call it that, is like dollying backward as you see him streak by in the background. I mean, all of that stuff, that's just like slam dunking on the artist right there. Or they are slam dunking on us.
And on shots like that where we see like a tighter shot on a character, I often like will look at like things like hair or like where the details would be most likely to be them just like copy pasting the previous panel. And Sprouse is not doing that here. Like if you look at Diana's hair, it is different wavelengths or like different like waves of hair as we like zoom in on her.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Which is very cool.
That's cool.
Again, this is the quality of the art that will be representative of like the later part of the run, which is it's just a bummer that is not the rest. But the good news is Alan Moore and Chris Sprouse do Tom Strong together, and that book looks fucking amazing for their entire time working together. So that it doesn't have the financial issues. It runs their entire story. So,
cool.
That's a book. We will talk about that at some point, Jmike, because it is because it's the Doc Savage story. It's like a very it's like trying to do Superman without superpowers.
Oh, that sounds good. I might be waiting for that to show up on my doorstep. I'm just kidding.
Inside this date that is going on, this like planning meeting, they have these like flashbacks to what was a like projection that Supreme uses like his like computer to like illustrate. And there are straight up Superman books that do this. Jmike, you still have my copy of The Greatest Superman Stories Ever Told.
Yep.
Hey, bingo card. Punch that one. But you still have my copy of the greatest Superman stories ever told. And in there is the Futuro story, where Superman does an analysis of what it would look like if he had never left Krypton and if Krypton hadn't blown up. And we see like this whole world, like this whole story of his life if Krypton never blew up. And it's just the end of the issue is just Superman with Batman and Robin being like, huh, that's pretty weird.
It's like that Futurama bit where they look at the TV and they see they see different scenarios and things. I forgot what that stupid thing was called, but they do something like that too in Futurama.
I mean, it's a sci-fi trope to have a computer that can sort of like predict the future and show like future possible stories for the characters. So that part, it like, again, this is very trope heavy, like invoking of like just classic comic book kind of fare and showing off these three different projections of like, well, what would these relationships look like? And here, they're all so fucking misogynistic, but then Diana comments on how misogynistic they are. So you know, so it's like so Inside Baseball, this issue, or rather Inside Baseball, this episode is going to be dropping right after the episode where we did the table read of the radio play that I did. And in that, I'm doing kind of a similar thing where there's like specific elements of misogyny and then people calling it out as a reference to the era being like, well, yeah, there was that misogyny in that material. Yeah. And we're acknowledging that it existed and we're poking fun at it as on purpose kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you read this book and you were like, yeah, I agree with that, I mean, you're nutso.
So we see Supreme go through three different possible mates, and his first one is Judy Jordan, and it's terrible.
Yeah. She just wants to keep up with the Joneses. That's like the only thing that she's concerned with. So he has to like get a house because she doesn't want to live in Citadel Supreme. He has to get a car. He keeps having to help the neighbors out, which I really loved. This guy, what does he say? Hi, Judy. Listen, our lawnmower's busted. We wondered if your hubby could bioengineer a strain of grass that doesn't need cutting. Sure thing, Henry. Right after he waxes the Supreme Mobile.
Yep. It's great. And, you know, speaking as a suburbanite dad these days, like I certainly relate to this existence of being stripped of all of your ability to go hang out with your friends and everything because you've got your responsibilities to attend to.
Oh man. And you know, the other thing that I really liked about this issue, and I'll have a little thing to say here, is that, boy, what a bad sentence I just constructed, but this reminded me a lot of Mary Jane and Peter Parker. This is my expertise because I read Spider-Man all the time, and throughout the publication of Spider-Man, there's always this like this push and pull where there's fans that think he has to be with Mary Jane and there's fans that think he doesn't have to be with her. And you get into this weird zone where like he gets married in the 80s, I think. And then everyone's like, all these writers can't figure out how to just not make Mary Jane at home always worrying about him. So then you have like 10 years of her just doing that, maybe 20, and then they have to like undo it with Satan. That's right. That's how they get out of that one. And so then they get him back to basics. And then now you have like what they've been doing for the last like 2 years where they dangle this weird carrot in front of us for the most recent run, which I've really not enjoyed. Some of it's been good, but a lot of it hasn't, where it's like, she's with this other guy. But they're dangling it like, of course they'll break up and she'll get with Peter, but then they're not doing that. And then Peter's not moving on. And it's kind of like, okay, guys, you got to figure something out. Like, and so I love how in this, we're seeing them in universe Supreme, you know, saying that they're discussing how he can't be with women, but then he's also noticing like, well, I could never do it because I'm a hero. And so in universe and meta commentary about comics, it just works so well. Yeah. And that's another reason this issue like really spoke to me, because it's like, you know, The Office, when Jim and Pam got together, the show just wasn't quite as good. It's the classic like sitcom trope, and comics are like that.
Yeah, so we really like explore like, okay, well maybe it doesn't work with one thing I really love in this like flashback version where it's like they're getting married and it's like, oh, I can't wait to take Judy home and find reveal to her that her husband is, or her groom supreme is none other than soft-spoken Ethan Crane. It's like, of course the 50s version wouldn't like have that be revealed that early. Like like we would wait until they're already married to have the secret identity reveal.
But Groom Supreme,
Yeah.
come on.
So then we set up that, all right, well, maybe not a normal woman as his paramour. What about something that's like kind of like crazy? And so they do the Lori Limerus version of the character. In this case, it is an angel who is a hypothetical concept that they make real, and it's horrifying what happens to her.
Yeah. She eats chips and dies, basically.
It's like that episode of Futurama, again, referencing Futurama, but it's like that episode of Futurama where Bender becomes human and he dies by like eating himself into oblivion, which I believe is one of that projections.
Yep.
Yeah. So it is straight up doing that.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah.
Because at first, like, she's all happy about everything, and then she goes out in the public, and like people are like, oh, "She's an angel. She can grant our wishes. She can heal us."
Yeah. Everyone wants a piece of her. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, maybe you should just stay home. Here's a TV and the couch. You should relax for a while. And then he goes off and does his superhero thing. He comes back and his robots are like, this is a bad idea. This is a very bad idea.
She is literally eating herself to death. Yeah. Which the one thing that I thought was like kind of funny is that explains why it wouldn't make sense for Supreme to date his impossible angel girlfriend, but the actual conversation that they're having about Omni-Man doesn't work. Like, it's a different circumstance with his like mermaid girlfriend. Like, that isn't the same. Like, the reasons why like Supreme doesn't get with an angel are different than for why Omni-Man shouldn't get with a mermaid. Also, yes, it is Omni-Man as the character in the comic that he's working on that is a Superman parody. It is not the Omni-Man from Invincible, for the record. Even though Supreme and that Omni-Man would have a fight later on. Anywho, lastly, they explore, well, what if it was like a Wonder Woman type character? And this one ends with them just like getting into a terrible fight. I couldn't stop listening to like Supreme in this like flashback specifically sounding like Peter Griffin to me. Only because certain other persons that throwing a tantrum stormed home to their mother goddess.
Yeah. Oh, now I got to reread it.
Yeah, because it was like thinking about like, what was that? There was that whole arc in, was it New 52 where Superman and Wonder Woman got together?
Yeah.
And people were like, we like it, but we don't like it because it's not what we're used to seeing and it feels weird.
Well, in this, they get into a terrible fight. And like I said, at the end of that fight, like, look at that last panel of their fight. It looks like that panel from Miracle Man where, like, after Kid Miracle's Man's
you're
rampage,
right.
like, it's the only time that we see, like, truly the effects of a superhero fight in this whole universe. And it is horrifying. And then we get this, like, wonderful, extremely sexy, like, they're about to kiss moment. And then it's like, oh, but then it wouldn't work. Why? Because it'd be a lie. Oh, yeah, I guess it would be.
Yeah. And then, you know, there's that meta commentary where it's like comic book writers can't figure out how to get people together. I know someone could do it, but you just have to be prepared for people to be upset, which it seems like is not a possible thing anymore because of too many death
So
threats.
they do actually explore their relationship further, which is cool. We see them like actually get together, and then it gets weird when Eric Larson comes in. So we do kind of explore it. And a later series that is a Supreme book, Supreme Blue Rose by Warren Ellis, is Diana Dane is the main character of that.
Oh, cool.
Which is actually really fun.
I think the problem lies when you have a character that's like 30 plus years old. That's when they're certain.
Yeah.
You have to make it new, but also not make it new.
Oh, for real. Speaking of making something new, we cut over to Judy Jordan and her granddaughter Hilda, who wants to draw a new drawing of Supreme Citadel, and it's like a fucking blueprint.
Yeah,
and she does it like instantly, and that's like the ominous thing that they hinted at would be at the end of this issue earlier on.
Well, and then this next issue, you know that I have to give this one high props because they say great Kirby cigar, and then when he punches Cyber Zeke, he says,
"Here's your no prize.
Here's your no prize."
Yeah, that feels like just such a commentary on like all the Image
come on.
villains of the time.
Oh yeah.
Like it feels like just like all the like the Spawn villains of the day. And I'm sorry I cut you off there.
Oh no, that was it. No, I was just agreeing with you. I mean, I don't know much about Image Comics beyond this, but I'm just going, oh okay, yeah, that's just kind of a nameless. I don't know. There's nothing really to remember him by. And I just love that he points out a continuity error in Omni-Man, and then he says, well, here's your no prize. I mean, that's great.
Then we have a nice little moment of Supreme talking to Diana, and then that leads into a nod to those old Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane comics, which is a gap in my research. I need to like read those at some point because it's surprising to me that ran for as long as it did. That there was just like Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane was its own book for a real long time.
Remember that one thing that happened, guys?
It is. I mean, I'm sure it's more that, but especially with them mentioning Kirby and the Stan Lee thing, this does kind of remind me of Fantastic Four, this little issue in between here.
I think that's fair, but I think that's because Fantastic Four, I think that 60s Fantastic Four is a continuation of like the super science concept that Superman has innately, and there is more crossover between those two books than people I think realize.
Okay. Yeah.
Like Kirby doing Fantastic Four, like that's that sort of out there, like, look how big this universe is kind of book, which is what the 50s Superman book was also. Great, expansive, really creative types working on it. So we get a look into the Rogues Gallery of Supreme, which is kind of fun just to, reassess all the characters. We see Darius Dax. We see Stupendo, the Simian Supreme. We get Immerpuss, the Reverse Supreme from a different mirror, or from a mirror timeline dimension. Korgo, the Space Pirate. Zaz, the Sprite Supreme, who I love as being, he can only exist in prime numbered dimensions, is his whole deal.
Yeah, that's fun.
Which means he can work in a comic book, because a comic book is 3-dimensional, but a comic book is not 4-dimensional. So he couldn't actually exist in our dimension because it's not prime numbered. The televillain is fun. He becomes important in a later story where he like arranges for a breakout from the Hell of Mirrors. So it's good to have him. It's good to set up the two different Supremium Man, a thing that will again be important, but also it's good to remind us about the Supremium Man, because that's going to pay off in an issue from here. And then we get the Shadow Supreme and Immerpuss sort of like pulling a prank, and it turns out to actually be S1 and S2 with makeup on. Which is the kind of dick move that like this is the Superman as a dick, like kind of like,
yep.
Like, that the cover of that would be on that website. Superdickery.com. And we see all these like variations of Judy Jordan, and many of them are references to other characters besides just like Lana Lang and Lois Lane. Because we get the giant turtle, and we get the like stretchy arms, like elongated lad. So there's like clearly some Jimmy Olsen in there, but all those transformations of like those classic comics are represented here, which is rather fun. And then we cut to the meat of the story, which is Judy Jordan and Hilda flying up to the Citadel Supreme and destroying all of the Suprematons.
Yeah.
With no trouble.
Yeah.
And then Supreme being surprised and trapped in the Hell of Mirrors, and Judy saying that this is not Judy that you're talking to. Bum, bum, bum. All right. So how did you guys feel when you got to this point?
I was very confused.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly what I was going to say. I was like, I know we're going to explain it, but I was like, I couldn't guess. I mean, one thing I've realized is I can't guess what an Alan Moore comic is going to do. Even when it's following tropes, it's like, I know there's going to be a big battle, but I don't know how these people got here or who they are. He's always unique in that. I don't know who could guess where he's going with his stories.
It's like even when they explained it, it took me back to, I don't know if you remember Case, but there was this Teen Titans episode, or after Slade died, Robin was going through his stuff, and Slade had some dust that had almost exactly the same thing that Dax did with his little microchip dust.
Oh yeah. Again, this is before that in terms of the comic versus the show.
And so he was just like, even after he died, he was like, no, as long as you live, I'm going to be the thing that haunts you in your nightmares, even after I'm gone. And he was just beating the crap out of Robin from beyond the grave. And that's what this reminded me of.
Yep.
And I was like, how the heck did he pull this crap off? And I was like, oh, wait. Comic books. Yes.
Yeah. So I thought that this was a genius plot twist.
Oh, yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's great.
I thought that setting up like the Lana Lang type as this like old grandma, and then revealing that it's actually like Lex Luthor having taken over the brain is so cool. And it, we deal with like the cancer stuff with the Supremium, like giving Darius Dax cancer. We deal with like the copying the brain into Judy by way of the nanodust, and then the wax having nanoparticles for the tracking information. Like, it's so cool, like the setup for like what this master plan of Darius Dax is. And then we get a callback to the Allied Superman, like the 40s issue, because he brought Magno over, like the enemy of like the Amazo equivalent robot, and that becomes his body that he uses for the rest of the issue once he slips into something a little more comfortable, I think is what he says. While Grandma finds something decent to wear, is what she says.
Yeah, there you go.
And so this is fun. I mean, like, we have a lot of stuff come together. We have the Citadel being revealed, and the Citadel has been a very big part of the story. So it's good that there's a payoff to what I think 3 issues are all about the Citadel Supreme.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Which is a lot when you consider this is a 12-issue Superman story. Like, 3 issues being about the Fortress of Solitude would feel excessive. And it's important here because it's like, oh yeah, it is this impregnable floating citadel that has all these like space guns from supervillains on it, floating over like one of the biggest cities in the world. So it shows off like just how terrifying a Superman would be just to have it like the mask like ripped off, in this scenario. It's like, oh yeah, well, you had this like, it's just like the Justice League cartoon where it's like, wait, you had a space laser like this whole time.
That's what I was gonna say. What was it, the Dark Heart episode where they have to like use the laser on the end of the space station?
Oh yeah. When they have to use it, as opposed to when it gets hacked later on, and like Sean Jones has to like rip it apart to like stop it from firing on Earth.
Yeah, but that little girl is terrifying.
Yeah,
the little cyborg kid has been terrifying.
Yeah, I love the Shadow Supreme. Also, I think he's very cool as this like devoted servant type character. It's a very different style of copy of Superman from Bizarro, and it's rather nice.
I do have a question though.
Sure.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Who is the guy in the throne? Who's sitting on the throne?
Oh, that's the End.
Was that the End?
Who is supposed to be kind of like a dark side style, like master villain type character.
See, they were like, hey, we brought you Supreme, and he's like, I don't care. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really clever the way that Suprema calls in reinforcements by way of
love that. Yeah.
saying the exact date and time on a news broadcast so that Zayla Zarn would come back with her reinforcements. And we also get the rest of the Allied Supermen, or the Allies, pardon me, Professor Knight and Twilight. We get all of them showing up, which is great.
We get the return of, what's his name? Billy Friday.
Yes.
And then the whole cycle starts over for him.
Like, oh no, not this again.
It is funny though how he starts where he's like, oh really, look, I told the convention organization last time I'm not judging any more fancy dress events, so wait a minute, don't I recognize that glowing rock in your hand? Isn't that the rock that turned me into, oh no.
Yeah.
And then he starts morphing in the next page.
Yeah, and it's great because the reason why he shows up is that he was with Zayla Zarn in the future prior to this. So like his whole sequence of events led him here full circle. Yeah, no, I love that. I love Magno like absorbing the Supremium and turning into the Supremium Man and falling through space-time. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah. Well, now that you've mentioned that this is kind of the first book to do this, I like this a lot more than the first time, or than when I was reading it earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's so ahead of its time in that regard, but now it's 30 years later, so it just doesn't feel that way. I love all of the things that loop back, the fact that we get the wave back to his younger self there. I love that we get this time loop going on with the Supremium. I love that we get a little bit more of the League of Infinity. One thing I think we haven't talked about is how cool, as a concept, heroes from throughout time brought together is. Like, Bill Hickok was a real person. Like, there's a hand in poker called Dead Man's Hand, named after Bill Hickok, because he supposedly was holding aces and eights when he got shot in the back. like that's a real person. Achilles is a figure of history. Aladdin.
Yeah, Aladdin. Yeah. That just seems like a joke. Fun. I love that one.
The caveman is a lot of fun. Witch wench or witch woman in her later appearances. Yeah. Also, I like that the very 50s sexist thing. It's like the Invisible Girl becoming Invisible Woman over time.
Yeah.
Again, like a lot of this is a conversation about comics moving forward. So I really like the League of Infinity. That I think that's a really fun take on the Legion of Superheroes. And then so Judy's body is fine, and so her brain is in there somewhere, her mind is in there somewhere. So Supreme is able to reconstruct her personality is what ultimately occurs, and he puts it inside a Judy Jordan Suprematon.
Cool.
Yeah, but so this is Supreme, the story of the year, and it's.
We did get through it.
Yeah, we got through it. We went fast because like each issue there is a lot that happens, but a lot of it's in the flashbacks.
Okay, yeah.
And then there's the bigger story.
That's true.
We moved pretty fast on that one. Again, I really like this. I think that the series as a whole is like my favorite issues are not in this chunk of the story, but it is a really good solid story. Over the course of 12 issues, like telling this big looping narrative about a Superman type. It's a complete closed loop for that like time travel element. And spoilers, most of the time travel elements are kind of closed loops. And where they're not, we find out how they work in such a way that they should be.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Which will make sense if we ever actually like come back here. I don't know. But closing thoughts, because like I have a lot. And I have talked a lot on this one, and I'm sorry for dominating a lot of the conversation. Jmike, what were your thoughts when you read this? And now that we've had a chance to talk issue by issue, what are your takeaways?
I mean, I was very confused at the beginning, but the more I read through it, the more fun I had, especially with like the end, especially at the end where like everything gets revealed, and you're like, oh, that makes a lot more sense now. And then you see like the Supreme, I forgot the dude's name again. Supremium Man falling through time and space, and everything lands the way you're supposed to be. And you're like, oh, that's pretty freaking cool. That's pretty cool. I can't believe that it happened. But yeah, like the Darius Dax, hilarious name, but very smart villain. I love it. Like, yeah, they really like hit the nail on that. That's very much Lex Luthor. That's something. That right there is something that Lex would do, and I'm pretty sure he might have done something like that before.
He's done similar things, but it's definitely very 60s Lex Luthor. Like that's the other part, which is that when this comic came out, we were like in the throes of businessman Lex being like the status quo, and to do like just like straight up mad scientist Lex like as a character is like a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's kind of close to the things he was doing in All-Star Superman, where he was just playing the extremely long game.
Yeah.
The extremely long game. And in the end, he kind of screwed himself over because of his own ego. But yeah, like this is a great story. Like all the Superman but not Superman story beats, the Justice League but not Justice League. What's the group called again? The
Allies.
The Allies.
And the League of Infinity
Yeah, even the kids groups were there. What are they called? I forgot the name again. From the Kids from the Future.
The League of Infinity, the Legion of Superheroes, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, you got Legion in here. And I was like, oh man, that's so cool. Case, this is why Case loved his book so much. All they're missing is Shazam.
Well, and they've got that because they've got Mighty Man.
Oh, true. There you go. That's all your favorite things in one book.
Yeah.
I see. I understand now. Yeah, this is a cool story.
Micah, how about you?
I liked it.
Yeah, I think I've said mostly what I've thought of it as we went along, but I would say as we discussed it more, a little more perspective, little more reflection. I think I bump it up a little bit more than I already liked it. But I mean, again, not to focus on the negative, but if the art was better, I mean, this thing bumps up like 20%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like,
Yeah.
but I think, funny enough, having read Miracle Man in the same year kind of shot this book in the foot a little bit.
That's fair.
Because that one just hit me in such a way where I was like, what? Like, you can do this? Even though, yeah, that book like really, really blew me away. And also a book that showed up on my doorstep, courtesy of Case. and so, yeah, you know, it's just one more interesting story written by Alan Moore. I mean, in the foreword of this, I really liked Mark Thompson said, I don't think Alan Moore could write a bad comic, but you take all those factors and the stuff of Legends as the ingredients, which unfortunately had a hard time getting notoriety. That is a special... Okay, never mind. It's just the one thing he said there that I meant. I don't think Alan Moore can write a bad comic, and he proves once again from the stuff I've read that it's pretty difficult for him to write a bad comic. So, yeah. It was quite the enjoyable thing, fun to dissect it all, and I appreciate getting another glimpse, you know, into at least Krypton adjacent world.
Yeah, I mean, it's not doing, strictly speaking, Superman, like the serial numbers are filed off, but this is getting the character of Superman very well, very much right. And I think that especially at a time where the character was not lost, but was definitely a particular flavor at the time, this was going back to sort of like Coca-Cola Classic. If you know, post-Crisis Superman was New Coke, still good, still sweet and great, but this was trying to do something with that, like, here's that classic flavor, and here's some like interesting comments about the industry that he's part of, and the medium that he's a part of. So yeah. I'm an unabashed fan. I do recognize that it has aged over time. That it is an older work than even some of the other things that like Alan Moore has written that came before it. Like it's just stuff has caught up to what this was doing, but it's still, I think, a really like strong entry in that sort of like pantheon of dissection of characters by way of multiple versions of them and all that jazz kind of stuff.
Yeah. One last thing about it too is I was just like, when you sent this to me, and I'm like, are you telling me that? I mean, it's like when you find out some old band and you know like one song, and then you get their greatest hits and you find out you know like 20 of their songs. That's kind of Alan Moore, where it's like I get like a new thing and I'm like, I didn't know that he was also famous for this. And then you read it and you're like, this is also great. What? And so you send me Supreme, and at this point I'm like, okay, I feel like I've hit, besides Swamp Thing, besides that, I've hit like his greatest hits, is how I thought. And I know that this is maybe a lesser work in the eyes of the public, but I'm still reading it and I'm like, but this is at least like, this is probably like it probably hit number 2 on the charts somewhere. As far, you know, if we keep the metaphor of music going, it's like, what? How did he do it again? You know,
he did that with a B-side. What?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
it's like a Martin Scorsese. You know, you just keep on making hits, and it's like, how do you do that? How do you stay relevant and keep writing relevant stuff for so many decades? It's crazy. So I was impressed even just at that alone.
Yeah, it's certainly an impressive collection of work for Alan Moore's entire career. It's an amazing thing, and this is a lesser known one. It is a stepping stone between his Image work and him doing America's Best Comics, which is a really good time for Alan Moore fans. That was my my high school period, and that was just fantastic as a huge fan of his stuff. But this series was a lot of fun, and it got a lot of good critical acclaim. Like I jumped onto the series because Wizard magazine like did a really like big profile on what Alan Moore had been doing with it. So like that's why I had to like collect all the issues. I not just like buy them as they were coming out, because I came in really right after this arc had concluded, and then went back and found all the issues. So it's a great work. I hope someday like a good like a good release of it comes out, especially a digital one. I think that would be really nice, especially one with the like backup features that were omitted, like there are like backup stories with like Squeak the Supreme House, like saving the day in the Supremacy, and like other tales. So I wish that those were around. And it's a story that then goes on, doesn't get finished. Alan Moore writes several issues past he writes an issue past fully, and like outlines what he was going to do with the series past like the point where it gets canceled because of financials on the book. And then Eric Larson picks it up like a decade later and does a version of he does the last issue that Alan Moore wrote, and then takes on and does like his own story from there. And it's fine. It's different. I enjoy it quite a bit, but it is a pivot from what this book was, and it recognizes that the book was no longer what it was. Just comics had moved on between that time. Like,
yeah,
this is a precursor to things like The Authority or like Invincible, which are like wonderful looks at like using the Superman archetype in fun, interesting ways. This is just a precursor to all that. It's a stepping stone for the medium as a whole, coming off of like what was the 90s post-crisis deconstruction kind of movement, and how are we coming out of that? How are we starting to embrace the silly again and have fun with comics again? And this was an early work in that, because Alan Moore, is very much on the forefront of whatever he's working on. But it's a really solid one, and I think that it's worth checking out. So, guys, thank you for coming with me on this journey. It means a lot to me to be able to gush about this book for 2.5 hours.
It's a blast.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Micah, thank you especially for allowing me to tie you on to just let me just strap you to a chair, and we're just going to just exposit at you for all this time.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Well, Micah, so we kind of jumped into it without really going too deep into who you are and where can people find you. Who are you? Where can people find you? What do people know you from?
Okay, well, this is perfect, because this is good timing. I have something pretty wild coming out, and by the time this episode comes out, I'm sure it will be out. I am a musician, and I came out with a live concert album / concert film on November 15th. It's called Go Fire Yourself, and it is earlier in 2024. Me and a 6-piece band, we got together and we performed my 10-year anniversary of my first album. So we played every song from my first album, we updated it, we changed it, and we shot the whole thing we're talking low budget, but we were, got some inspiration from Wolfpack's Live at Madison Square Garden and Stop Making Sense. And I'm really proud of it. It's really awesome. You can watch it for $15 on my website, which is micahmccaw.bandcamp.com. But the album is streaming everywhere. So if you got Spotify, if you got Apple, you can at least listen to it. And then if you want to watch it, you have to pay for it. But listen to the album and say hello to me on anything else. And then I do have a podcast with my wife, the McCaw Podcast Universe. Case has been on it. So go check out Dawn of the Planet of the Apes or Logan as jumping off points. Yeah, but go listen to Go Fire Yourself. Do it.
Yeah, everyone should definitely go do that. Like, please check it out. Micah is awesome.
It's real. I'm very, very proud of it. It's really, really, really good. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, and can you give your socials?
Oh yeah, on Instagram I am at out_of_Micah, out of Micah. On Facebook and Twitter, if you just type in Micah McCaw, you'll find me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, people should find you, follow you, check out your album and your movie. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's on Letterboxd, it's on IMDb, so afterward you can click a rating, you can log it, you can do all that jazz.
Nice.
Or I should say rock and roll, baby.
Yes, well, everyone should go rate it and, check it out, because it will be long after it has dropped when this episode comes out. So,
Yeah.
because we are always recording a little bit ahead of time.
That's perfect.
But yeah, so everyone should go check that out. And I'm sure it's a huge hit by the time you're going to check it out. But let's continue to keep that momentum going.
Keep it going, folks.
Well, keeping that momentum going, Jmike, where can people find you and follow you?
Oh gosh, I am trying to get away from the X app. I'm trying to move over to the Butterfly app. So for right now, you can still find me on Twitter at jmike101, but I am also on Blue Sky at j5.bluesky.social. What? I'm over there too. So hit me up. I'll respond as much as I can.
Yeah, and likewise, I think we're all just kind of being done with X.
Yeah.
I'm still there. I'm still at Case Aiken there. I'm also at Case Aiken at Blue Sky. Otherwise, you can find me on Instagram at Quetzalcoatl5, because I'm holding on to my AIM screen name for dear life.
Yeah. We love to see it.
You can find Jmike or me on the Discord server for Certain POV. We've got links in the descriptions for our website and in the descriptions of the episodes. Check them out. Come interact with us. It's a great time there. We have a ton of fun chatting with everyone on the Discord. It's so much fun. You can also interact with the hosts of all these other great shows on the Certain POV network, such as I'm going to shout out Books That Burn, which is a really great show that takes the perspective of the characters as rational actors that have trauma inflicted upon them by the authors, and does an analysis of that. It's a great show. I really recommend it. Check it out. That's awesome. You can find it at certainpov.com, along with tons of other great shows, the link to our Discord, and us. And you can come back for our next episode. But until then, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Falson and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Sophia Ricciardi. Our logo is by Chris Batista, and episode art is by Case Aiken. Our theme is by Geoff Moonen.
All right, Josue, let's go through our new comic day stack. We have a lot to review.
I know. Maybe we've gone too far.
Well, let's see. Marvel, of course. DC.
I Got Image, Dark Horse,
Black Mask, Boom, IDW.
Aftershock, Vault, of course, Mad Cave,
Oni, Valiant, Scout.
Magma, Behemoth.
Wow, that's a lot. Well, all we need now is a name for our show. We need a name for our show about reviewing comic books every week. Something clever, but not too clever.
Like a pun? It's kind of cheesy.
Yeah, it's something that seems funny at first, but we might regret later on as an impulsive decision a few dozen episodes in.
Yeah, we'll think of something.
Join Keith and Josue for We Have Issues, a weekly show reviewing almost every new comic released each week. Available on Geek Elite Media and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.